Can I get a man?
Amen.
Guess what, baby? Nathan's back.
Yeah, I'm back, but I guess I'm almost not back. My camera's not working, but
I think
my
Nathan's
voice is here.
pretending to be. He's actually in France, and there's an Eiffel
I'm
Tower
still in
behind
France.
him.
Exactly. That's
The
it.
spirit of Nathan is here.
Busted.
Oh my goodness. Welcome back to Calling All Beings. I'm your host, DJ. As the aforementioned, there's something going wrong with his camera. So unfortunately, you're not getting to see his hair. But Money Nathan back from his European tour. How was it, bruh, man?
It was great, man. I had a wonderful time. Been to some places I'd not been before, which was really cool. My kids had never been, so they had an opportunity to see it with me for the first time. And it was, honestly, it was a little chilly. It was chillier than I thought it would be in June in Europe, and wet. But we made the most of it. Had a blast. Saw some really cool things. Tons of art, all the great masters, and even some new ones. So it was a good time. Missed you guys though. Good to be back in the podcast seat.
We missed you, man, because it's just not the same when you're not here, man. So that kind of, we made the best of it. Debs, how are you, my friend? Other than your back, which is out, and we need to get you to hang upside down on a teeter table.
I think things are going well. I feel like there's an upswing in positivity on the planet right now. A little bit more sunshine. So this is the direction we need to be going in. Hooray, hooray.
You're a big part of that. And Courtney connected. It doesn't look like she's on a road trip. Is that?
No, I'm not. I'm in Alaska right now. So I am settled in my primary residence domain. Settled for a time.
Last show, she was in Montana. This show, she's in Alaska. And a couple before that, she was a contact in the desert. You don't know where Courtney's going to log on from. And pretty soon, she's going to be logging on from Pennsylvania, I believe. So,
Yes.
Real quickly, we want to announce our new project is upcoming. Now that Nathan's back, he's going to work on the artwork and imaging. We're not going to tell you exactly what it is, but Nathan, it's going to be in service to the community.
I mean, I think it's got a heart of service, right? That's it's sort of centered around helping people in need, and trying to do right in the world.
Definitely. Nathan will be the voice of said podcast. We're thinking of maybe doing live on-air readings. Nathan will be the voice, and the lead will be Courtney, and then Deb and I will be falling in line. Right, Debs?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be all about providing support. Let's put it that way for this project. Mm-hmm.
It's going to be so cool. I'm so excited about it. We've spent a month on it already, and the next phase of it is going to happen here in early July before we can put it together. But we will announce it to you conceivably next week once Nathan's got it done, what it's going to look like. And hey, Carolina's here. So hi, everybody. Hello, Water Lily. And now I guess we'll bring on our guests of honor. So these are two folks that we've been friends with for going on probably close to 3 years now. We got to go to an event in New York City together as CAB, and get to meet these folks. They have taken this step. These are super creative people. Both of them are experiencers that have really been moved by the phenomenon. We just recently found out about the female person and her experiences, and the male person here is very, very well known for having an experiencer support group for several years now, and has connected with people from every walk of life that you can imagine has been part of his group. So without further ado, party people, put those hands together for the homegirl from Ohio, Kelly Chase.
Hi, guys.
And her partner in Ontocalypse. Put them together for the handsome one, J. Christopher King. Can I get a amen?
I knew singing was going to happen.
It's like a gospel soul hour now. It's really
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Yeah.
DJ.
Nice to be here. Good to see you all.
Man, we
beautiful
haven't had
internet.
Jay. How long? I don't remember the last time we had you on. It's been so long. Kelly's co-hosted with us a couple of times. She's taken some real short notice. So that was really cool. It's an honor that you guys are back and that you have created. I guess you guys are creating a series, among other things. We got to see the trailer, which was so dope, and I literally thought it was a UFO for real. When coming out that door, I was like, look at that, man. It's shaped like a starfish on fire. Ah! Nathan, man, take it away, bro, man.
Yes, sir. So yeah, we did get a chance to look at that trailer from that you guys shared with the community at Contact in the Desert. Loved it. It's looking really good. The UFO that you're talking about, DJ, actually I think came from Max McCabe's encounter. Is that right, guys? So
What?
That's right.
I'm not giving too much away,
Yeah.
but I've seen that. It's a Finn 365 creation, which he's the guy. Those of you in the community who know him, he's really good at what he does. So excited to see that featured in the trailer, as well as the other voices that you've got in that piece. You know, we heard from Jeffrey Kripal. Really excited to have that. Leslie Kane. You guys have all the big names. So talk us through how this came about. You know, we want to know how you got started. We want to know, everything that you're planning, because I know it's not just this, film. There's more to it. There's a lot more to it. And if anybody knows Kelly, she's got master plans for everything. And Jay is also an expert tactician. So I'd love to just get into the details. So what are you guys, can you tell us about the project and everything else that's going along with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I can kick us off. So last summer, obviously it was we were having our hot brush summer, and everyone was very excited. And there were a lot of people at the time in the community, I think, kind of looking around at each other and saying like, hey, like, what can we do? What can we do? Like, how do we help? What can we do that's proactive? And so we ended up going to our friend Jordan Flowers' house. He's another really great guy in the community. And he invited several other people who were like founding things and creating things and making things, who were all kind of asking the same question of like, what can we do? And we ended up meeting out there and me and Jordan and Jay formed a company called Ontocalypse. And, we really wanted to work on media that kind of addresses where we are right now in terms of just our knowledge about not just non-human intelligences, but about, the universe, reality in general. And, we talk a lot about ontological shock, but we called our company Ontocalypse because we really believe that like what we're coming up against is an ontocalypse, that it is, kind of the death of our ontologies, and that there's a sort of a new world waiting to be born. And we kind of just got sick of waiting around to be able to talk about that. I think that there's, in kind of the disclosure narrative is sort of ended up dominating the conversation of ufology, which like makes a lot of sense, right? It's like the most exciting thing that's happened in ufology for a long time. But at the same time, it feels like that ends up being the only conversation that we're having. But meanwhile, there are like people who are having experiences every single day. There are people who are getting more and more interested in this topic every single day. And, Jay and I both have communities, mine through my podcast and his through the Experiencer group, where we're constantly in contact with people who are coming to this topic either through an experience or through curiosity. And those people have bigger questions than just about like the government cover up and what's going on with all of that. And, do we have crafts and bodies? I mean, a lot of people I know you guys have these kinds of conversations on your show all the time, want to start integrating this stuff and start talking about like, what does this mean for the nature of reality? What does this mean about how I live my life and where I, spend my time and my energy? And so, we wanted to really create media that spoke that spoke to that, and to kind of, because we're independent, we're able to do things that other people aren't necessarily able to do, because we don't have to answer to anyone. And so, whereas, if you do something through a big streamer or a network, you might have to like ask Mick West what he thinks. Well, like, we know what Mick West thinks, and we don't feel like it's particularly helpful to the conversation. And
It's
so
not. It's pretty worthless.
so we just decided to, every single other docuseries kinds of ends in this place of, should we even be talking about UFOs? Is there even a point to it? And kind of trying to make that case that it's even worth talking about. And we wanted to start with UFOs are real, and then sort of now what? So I feel like I've been rambling. I'll let Jay step in.
You're
Yeah,
great,
you were
great
doing
orator.
great. You were doing fantastic.
Smoking it. Great. Glad to hear it.
I don't even know where to pick up from there. Do you guys have a follow-up question along those lines?
Debs.
I do. So you were just saying UFOs are real. Let's start with that. And I feel like that's, happened a few points of time in history. For some reason, what went through my head was that Disney documentary. I don't know if you guys are aware of that secret Disney documentary. They took it really seriously, and that was done in the 1970s. So I guess my question is, why do you think we keep having to present this again? Like, why do you think we just aren't going to move do you think the ball is moving forward? Those are my questions.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. I think that the ball can move forward, and I think part of it is that, maybe there's more than one ball. Maybe we've got balls rather than just the one ball. And I think that we are definitely moving forward. However, I think that what you're mentioning, which is just the kind of like spin cycle of the mainstream media in general, I think is absolutely accurate as well. People were talking about the cover-up, and even correctly identifying some of the agencies and military groups associated with cover-up as early as the early 50s. So here we are, it's 70 years later, and people are still pointing at similar folks and having similar conversations about what's happening out there. And they'll even cycle to the point of being like, hey guys, remember orbs? Orbs happen too. Or like, what about these biological shaped, UAP? People have been reporting those too. And, the occupants will be a subject of conversation, then they won't be a subject of conversation. Then they'll come back again. And so really what we see here is that there's a vast amount of media control. And that's obvious. That's incredibly obvious. There's Project Mockingbird. There's been many other situations where even independent-minded people that have corporate jobs have to be mindful of advertisers. So even if they're not affiliated with some nefarious plot, there's often capitalism and corporate behavior behind some of the self-censorship that happens in mainstream media, right? So how do we get around that? We produce shit ourselves, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I would also, I think I really agree with that. I'd also say that I think part of the reason it's hard to advance the ball down the field is because we keep getting stuck in the same part of the conversation of, trying to prove that this is real. And then, you run up against, you're looking for hard evidence, and then you end up running up against this kind of bottomless government cover up, and there's no answer. Right. And so eventually people kind of move on. And so that's why we really want to try to have a different kind of a conversation where we're not necessarily trying to get to the bottom of the grand mystery and get the answers, because we're not sure that we're even able to do that, but rather to give people kind of frameworks and models so that they can understand these things, so that these ideas have a place to go in their brain, and it doesn't just get kind of shoved into a back corner somewhere with the stuff you don't know what to do with. And so I'm really excited to be able to do that, because that's not something you could do in a normal television show. In fact, we're working with people who are very experienced at this, who work on, edit shows that you've heard of and probably watch. And, you know, they're constantly trying to get us to kind of like cut things down, and be like, this is too smart. You can't say this in a television show. And we're like, you know what? We can, though, because we're not trying to sell this to a million people. Like, we don't need to sell a million of these to pay back our investors and to be in good shape to do another one. Like we've been extremely frugal and lean and independent and bootstrapped with everything. And we know that the audience is out there for this, and it's not everybody, and that's okay. But for the people that this is for, it's like a wildly underserved audience. And I think we're doing things that like I haven't seen, at least in a film medium before.
You know, one of the coolest things is you do these amazing analogies, and one of the people that's equal to you is Jay. Jay does amazing metaphors and analogies. So rock on, Jay. Earlier, I can't remember what it was, the spin cycle one maybe. But anyway, let's give it over to our cabbie prospect, who we're so proud of, Courtney Connected.
Hey guys, I have seen you both in the circuit out there on the beat. And I have to say, Jay, when we were at the Soul Symposium, you gave me the biggest laugh because I was just standing there listening, waiting to say hello. And you were talking about the pains, right? The growing pains of doing independent movie and your project. And you were talking about it. And I believe you were there maybe even to do some filming, you know, on site. I'm not sure, but I think so. So I have a question for both of you because you're so articulate. You've been in this field. And you've obviously been able to make a creative project your way, the way you want to do it. So picking and choosing the content and all of that, and not to mention the funding, which you already covered. You know, how difficult that is to make an independent project and the interest involved with money. So how did you balance those decisions, right? Where money is coming from to fund your project and what might be behind that in terms of the story and production value, and then what you decided in the editing to cut and to keep in, if you can comment on those two things.
That's a great question. Thanks, Courtney. Yeah, the funding was, I'm not going to say that it was easy, and it was a challenge. I mean, it took significant work, and I think that that's one thing that, you know, when we're talking, Kelly was just talking about how we're trying to give people frameworks to think about things within this context of the show, right? And looking at different models and, different conceptualizations than we're used to seeing on TV, right? For example, we're not even used to talking about cryptoterrestrials or extraterrestrials or interdimensionals. These don't usually kind of enter the debate on a TV show. Even though they're fascinating topics. And even though, sci-fi and especially like alien movies dominate the top 10 of movies in Hollywood. If you look at the blockbusters, there's always aliens in the mix. So, why can't we have those conversations, A? And B, we need to have those frameworks. Similarly, like when we're talking about independent funding and talking about grassroots efforts in this kind of a community, more people need to realize that there's a structure to finding investors. And part of it involves putting together a pitch deck. This is like a really, really common thing to do in a situation where you want to find investors. You have to sit around and think, do I know anybody that has money that likes playing around with their money, right? And then you think, well, I don't know that many people, but do I know somebody that knows a lot of people that are like that? You have to start thinking this way, right? And then after that, you really have to think about, what am I trying to do here? What's a path forward? So for how these people can get money back, or are they trying to get money back, right? And once you start answering those questions, then you can start, assembling text and even graphics to try to make your case. And, in our situation, Kelly was absolutely incredible at assembling a fantastic pitch deck. And even just that, you were talking earlier, DJ, about this new project that you had, and you're like, we've been working on this for a month. We must have worked on our pitch deck for like 3 months before we even took a meeting. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe it was only 6 to 8 weeks, but we had meetings about the pitch deck. Like there were,
Oh, yeah.
like it was extensive. So, once what I'm trying to say here is that, like, I think that there are a lot of folks in the ufology community that feel that they're powerless, and they're not. All they have to do is look at how these structures work in other frameworks. Like, how does it work in a traditional business? How does it work with a traditional independent film? How does it work with publishing your own book? How does it work with setting up your own website? And people are not powerless. In fact, these days people have a lot more independent control and the ability to do it yourself, maybe more than they ever have. So yeah, I'm incredibly excited about that. In terms of, like, how do we balance that? Well, part of it is recognizing that we're still getting on our feet. And so what kind of money can we put together? And, it's definitely less than Ancient Aliens. It's significantly less than that. But then you also have to balance that with what are the skill sets of the people that you bring onto the project. And so, you look at a lot of TV shows, and I know this from having produced television in the past, that people will have like 8 or 10 editors on a television show. And sometimes it'll be 2 editors like paired up to do one episode, and people will leapfrog and have like whole, and then there'll be people that just do motion graphics or just do titles and things like that. And I've sat around and post a bunch of times and walked around and seen editors and assistant editors literally asleep at their desks with the lights off because they're underworked. And I'm not advocating for people not sleeping or anything like that, but I do know what waste looks like in a situation like this. And so, are we overworked right now, Kelly and I, for the show? Absolutely. Would we do it differently if we had another season? Absolutely. There's got to be a balance point there, like what you're asking about, Courtney. And in terms of like the subject matter, thankfully, in our pitch deck to investors, we were like, we want to make smart TV. That was one of the biggest headlines. We want to make smart television that will grab people. There's not enough smart TV out there. That was one of our biggest points. And thankfully, a lot of people that are relatively successful agreed with us and wanted to fund smart TV. Kelly, do you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of, I think that when you do something like this, what I found is that there's like the thing that you set out to make, and then there's the thing that you actually make. And that in a lot of ways, something like this is born out of 1,000 compromises, right? And that can be really intimidating. But I have to say that having gone through kind of the crucible of this process, that I'm really grateful for it and all the challenges that have come along the way. Every single challenge or speed bump that we've hit has made the show better. Like, it has pushed us to a place that we weren't before. And I think I've also been pushed in terms of my understanding of the phenomenon. And significantly since this started, everything about how I view the field and the phenomenon and everything related to it has completely changed and evolved. And I think that's just because like there's really something to be said for like getting out there, right? To like not just talking to the experts, which is an incredible experience, but also like talking to people on the ground. We went and did a whole like kind of investigation of a case down in Texas, which I'm really excited for you guys to see. And that kind of stuff is really impactful. And so, as we put it together, there are things that ended up getting on the cutting room floor that are devastating to me. But like Jay told me early on, you have to kill your darlings in this business. And that's what it feels like. There are sections cut out that I can't imagine that we ever cut out. But I think really just trying to thread the needle between creating something that's like just accessible enough for an outside audience, that we're not like completely alienating people, and that we're giving them enough to start with and enough to hopefully pique their curiosity to get them started. But we also didn't want this to be like with television, you always have to talk to the lowest common denominator. So you're always starting with like UFO 101. And we didn't want to make UFO 101. We wanted to make like a grad level, UFO show, and that it's still hopefully something that people on the outside are able to watch and enjoy and get something from. And so that's really kind of how we were making decisions along the way about what was included and what wasn't.
I mean, I got a checkbook. I could have bankrolled this whole thing. All you guys had to do is, all right, maybe not. I'm no Jordan Flowers.
Season two.
Okay. Or wait a minute, Money Nathan. No, I'm just kidding. Jordan, actually no, Finn 365 is in there. If you guys want to hear about his experiences when he was driving a taxi over in the UK, and his triangle UFO experience is amazing. So check out UFO Thinker Frank and go to that episode that says Finn 365. So really fascinating stuff. So
can I mention something really quick?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Finn has actually been doing incredible work for our series. He contributed, as you saw in the trailer, he contributed some of his prior work for us to be able to use to illustrate some of the situations that we're talking about through the show. And he's also been doing new work. We've worked with him on new work from some of these new cases that we're bringing out, and some cases that have been talked about before but haven't been illustrated very accurately. And so Finn is so good at getting the details down. And so we're really happy with what's been happening that way. And I look forward to everybody seeing how that works with our editing, the experiencers that we're bringing in, and the film and the score to really bring about something unique for the viewers. So thanks, Finn.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Finn, guys like you and gals that are doing this stuff, basically when you have someone who's watching this that hasn't seen a UFO and doesn't really know what that experience is like, when you guys watch this trailer, you're going to get that feeling like you just walked out of your home and you looked up and saw this, and it's mind-blowing. And it's very, very powerful. I've only had one sighting in my lifetime, and it was a long time ago back there in New York. But that's what people like Finn can bring, so that you can kind of get a sense of what it's like. Not the visceral reaction that you have in your entire body, but at least visually, you're just going to go, wow. And that's just a microcosm of what it really is. And you know what? You're right, Jay. We're probably going to be another 60 days before we get all the production done on this podcast and weave in interviews and music and everything else. So, yeah, I'm with you. It's going to take a minute. Jay, so my question for you is you've had a very deep relationship with the phenomenon on many levels. And different phenomenon, actually. And I'm curious that now that your life is you're out working, doing things, making things happen, even though you've been behind the camera before and you've been in front of the camera before, do you still have a current relationship with the phenomenon that's still affecting you, that which had you start that group?
That's a great question, DJ. Yeah, I have. It's more subtle these days, I guess you'd say. I haven't had an encounter with. How do I put this? I haven't had an interpersonal encounter with a non-human entity in my recollection since 2017. So that's 7 years now. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why it happens. I don't know why it doesn't happen. I don't know where there's periods where people see and experience things a lot and then have periods that are relatively dry, or why things stop altogether for some folks. I have had other experiences more recently. But I guess in general, I like to have kind of like a holding period with my own experiences, so that I can kind of process them and think about them before I kind of talk about them. And so I'm generally comfortable talking with in kind of public situations like this up until about my 20s. And then after that, I'm still in a kind of long form process of putting the data points together. Um, so, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at these days. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I wouldn't even ask you to characterize it because we don't dig on into people's personal lives and business here. We don't ask you to talk about anything you don't want to talk about, you know. So I was just curious if you had an ongoing relationship and if that were welcome or do you miss it or do you desire to have more?
Oh, gosh, what's a good way to put that? I can't imagine my life any other way than the way that it is now. So, however that happened, like, I think it's worked out well. Like, I'm happy to know all of you. I'm very happy to work with Kelly every day. I'm happy with so many other people in the community, both the experiencer group community, the online community, and just kind of the network, the loose network of researchers in anomalous studies that kind of surrounds the world, right? So even just with who it's connected me to and the kind of conversations that we've had, I'm really happy for having had the experiences that I've had to kind of just inform my thinking, because that's what propelled me into having these conversations with other people and really getting involved. And it's still mysterious, but it's enchanting. There's like a re-enchantment with the world that happens when you dig into the phenomenon. And I was just on a panel show last week for a Northern California PBS station, KEET, with James Falk, right? And Kevin Knuth was on there, and Lester Nare was on there, and Jim Madden, and gosh, who's the other? I'm missing one person, but I can't. Anyway, so like
Lester.
Yeah, there's Lester. So I guess one of the points that came up there was talking about how when you look at the phenomenon looks back at you. And Kevin agreed with that on the show very fervently. And I think that there's a lot to that. So how do I put this? Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you put a significant amount of experiencers together, or if you put a lot of people that are really digging deep on this phenomenon together in any kind of situation, you kind of raise the likelihood that phenomena will occur. I'll just put it that way.
I'd say, the most surprising thing you said there is you were happy to know me, because most people aren't happy after they meet me. Nathan, go ahead with your question, sir. For the Hugh Jackman of the UFO community and obviously the Lois Lane of the UFO community.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to touch on, you sort of touched on this a little bit already in terms of the scope and the mission of Ontocalypse. And it strikes me that it's kind of a passion project. It's not something that you're like, a lot of media endeavors are part of their mission is to make money. It's not just, obviously making money is fine. Let's not, disparage that. People have to make money to have a living, but it doesn't strike me as a driving factor in this project. So that's really exciting to see. Like, the passion comes through in everything that you're doing. And I know that that's a guiding principle that you have. So that's really great to see. But sort of, I guess, alongside that, I want to talk a little bit about the way in which I think this entire story is unfolding. And I know a lot of you guys have been thinking about this for a very long time and living it essentially. And so you've been processing this. And I think for many folks in the community who have been, myself included, jumping into this in the last few years, there's been this kind of conception that there's going to be a big moment where this announcement is made or this event occurs, and then the change is happening. But I think I'm seeing a shift more so to and this is in part like what you guys are doing, a shift towards making the conversation more acceptable. Like you're setting the table so that we can have this conversation just generally in society. And I actually think that's the better way that this unfolds, right? I think it's more destabilizing for this big announcement to come out and then people are just sort of reeling with it. It's less destabilizing for us to normalize strange experiences that we've all had and throughout human history, and just make it okay for us to talk about that. So I wonder if you could maybe discuss that difference there in the way people think about the disclosure, maybe how you guys approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you get us. You really kind of zeroed in on something that is really important to us, which is, differentiating, having a conversation that's differentiated from the disclosure conversation, for a variety of reasons. I think that, obviously we support disclosure. We use our platforms where and when we can to support that. But we don't need to wait for the government to tell us what this thing is. Like, we can go and figure that out on our own, or at least we can start to. And I think that when a lot of people, when they start, I know I certainly felt that way when I started, it felt like we were just, right around the corner from some big announcement, and there was going to be this revelation. And then we were going to like understand what UFOs are because somebody was going to tell us. And I just don't think that that's how it's going to go at all. I do think that there should be greater transparency, and hopefully there will be greater transparency about what the government does know. But in terms of like what this thing is, for us to understand it, I mean, I think anybody who's been doing this for a while, you're constantly kind of like building these new frameworks and understandings to process what you know, and then you learn more and it can't hold it anymore. And so those kind of models have to come crashing down and you have to build new ones. And it's like a constant, I think that that's going to be an ongoing process for us, both individually and as a species, as we go through this together. And, I think that like there's so much work that needs to be done, and there's so many different places that this conversation needs to be had. But I think that like we're really focused on like how can we most authentically express what we have to contribute to this conversation, which is just kind of like our thinking and where we are, which is by no means like definitive or, anything. Like, we're exploring this just like anybody else. But I think that, kind of modeling that process for people of what it looks like to go through this and to have that onto those wave after wave of ontological shock, and have it kind of upend everything that you understand about the world over and over and over again. And actually like the joy and the fun and the magic that's to be found in that process. Like, I think that's really a conversation that we're really invested in having, not just with this docuseries, but, I think we're having a ball doing this, and we want to do it together for a long time. And I think, all this really the focus of Ontocalypse going forward is that exactly.
Yeah. And thankfully we're not alone in that, for example, with the show, we've got, really brilliant minds like Jeff Kripal and Diana Pasulka and Mike Masters and Whitley Strieber and so many other incredible people that are contributing and helping with these frameworks and helping with the cases and helping really kind of like roll out the smart TV that we want to see in the world. And so we're not, I think you don't have to worry about the full weight of the show, resting on our meager IQ points. They're kind of evenly distributed over about 15 people or so. So that's helpful as well.
You guys are smart. You guys are no Fredo Corleones. No, I was going to say, relative to what Kelly was saying, they are going to tell us. I mean, we know who we're talking about when they say they don't, Jim Semivan, who's a friend of Jay's and the show. I don't know if Kelly's met Jim or not. Maybe you have or had him on your show. I know Jay has. They don't know what this is. They don't know how to explain it. Experiencers know more about that or have this ongoing contact about the nature of the phenomenon than they do. So don't wait that they're going to tell you what this is, because they don't know what it is, which is one of the reasons they're not telling you. There's several. But anyway, Debs.
Yeah, I concur. That was something I was thinking as well, that there are tons of very smart people involved with this topic. Don't disparage any IQ points here.
That's
Because
right. That's right.
and
And Debs and Jay and Kelly and Money and even Courtney Connected, who's a damn PhD candidate, is a couple of them. Sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
And I was basically going to say the same thing. I don't think at this point, even if the government was telling us, "Hey, this is real," they wouldn't be telling us something a lot of people didn't already know.
Right.
So, like we know. Okay, well, what's the answer? Well, they don't know either. So I just think if all the brilliant people on Earth really haven't pinpointed it, what else can we do? But so I have like this little challenge question for you guys. So, if you were going to summarize in, say, less than a minute, everything really important that you wanted to get across to someone to really get them to understand what was going on as best as we could with your very smart IQs, what would you say?
I think I would say that our senses aren't an objective window into the world, and that there is more around us and in our environment and on our planet than we could ever possibly be aware of. And that people seem to have really strange experiences that seem to happen at kind of the edge of our senses and the edge of our understanding, and that is worth our time and our interest, because it'll tell us a lot about the nature of our reality beyond. It's a way for us to grow and evolve as a species.
Yeah, I would totally agree with what Kelly just said. I can't fit it into 1 minute. That's why we negotiated for 180 minutes of television, so that we could start to answer that question. Yeah, in addition, I mean, I do think that is incredibly important. And I think a lot of the mysteries of this conversation become a lot less mysterious if we just start considering the fact that there's limits of our perception, like every animal and insect and being living thing in this world has limits to their own perception. When you think about a tree or, a wasp, right, or anything else, like we have some basic understanding of what, in some situations, what those living beings are able to perceive or what they're able to detect. And from that, we can also extrapolate that we only have so much of a light spectrum that we can see. We need augmentation if we're going to look at infrared, all sorts of situations like that. Dogs can hear different frequencies than we can. And it just keeps going off of that, right? So I've already gone over a minute, so I should just... But essentially,
Do you want me to
that's just
summarize
me
what I
like
think?
clapping along with. That's what me clapping along with what Kelly said. But as far as myself goes, I think the most important thing is that people talk to each other about their experiences,
Okay.
and that people normalize the conversation. I think that that's the most important thing, and to recognize that, to get somebody to recognize that they've probably heard somebody in their circle, their family group, that has had these situations happen, and to think to themselves about what they do differently, or how they would respond to a conversation like that if someone were to approach them again.
Okay, so can I summarize this real quick? We need to
Please, ma'am.
accept we do not know everything, that there's a lot of things we do not perceive well, and we need to be able to talk about it. Less than a minute. I think I got it.
You did it.
Did a great job, Deb. Good
You
job,
guys
Deb.
are so much fun.
Excellent.
Yeah, you guys are able to giggle and have fun, yet you're so serious and have such a great understanding of the topic. And both of you are just amazing speakers and orators. It's interesting what you said, Jay, just because you could be like in South Florida and a honeybee or a hornet could be within feet just off the coastline of a dolphin, but not know that the dolphin exists if the dolphin was a foot underwater. or a whole sea of fish that don't surface. You know what I mean? It's interesting. They're so close, but they don't know the other one exists or can't perceive it. Or if they did see it, they'd probably be like, what is that? That thing's a little thin. So anyway, Courtney connected. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, I had many different questions, but I've kind of distilled down to one main that I think is very impactful for both of you. And, you're in the leadership space now, essentially, for experience or talks, empowerment, discussions. But also, I know this is a very sensitive topic, is for experiencers identifying themselves, right? So not only just to, their family potentially, and that can cause certain, fallout potentially. So when you're talking to people and you're talking about specifically your production or going on camera, this is an important thing because you're going to have an experiencer come out, and share their story and have a much wider impact and be recognized. And how have you handled, counseling experiencers essentially, or preparing them for that, for their introduction potentially into the community? And this could also be through, the experiencer group process where they're getting ready to come out to other people in social settings or their community. How have you handled that, and how have you counseled folks to deal with that in their life?
That's such a great question. There's one experiencer in particular who's really coming out for the first time. And his story is told kind of through episodes 1 and 2 primarily. And it's an incredible story, and it's multi-layered, and it took him a long time to be ready to talk about it. It's interesting because I connected with him years ago. He was actually one of the very first people when I started my podcast who reached out and was like, "Hey, I like your podcast." And, and I heard kind of bits and pieces of his story over the years as we kept in contact, but never the whole thing. But I just knew that it was something special, but he really wasn't ready to talk about it, even off the record. But some things have changed in his life. He started his own company. He's kind of going out on his own. And, he didn't have the same kind of corporate concerns about keeping this quiet as he did before. And he has some level of sort of independence and the ability to kind of do this now. And it felt to him like the right time. And his family, because this is something that impacts his entire family. We talked to 4 generations of this family about this story. They felt ready also. And so I think, we definitely have talked. His name's Courtney. We definitely have talked with Courtney, about kind of what it's like to take that leap. And I'm certain those conversations will continue. Courtney is somebody who has such a groundedness and purpose and a clarity about him and who he is as a person and what his responsibilities kind of are as a human and as a man. And he's a really special person. And I think because he's so special, and so certain of himself, that we've been able to kind of do this in a way that feels safe for everybody. And I'm really happy with how that turned out. And I'd love to hear it, Jay, because this is really Jay's wheelhouse.
Yeah, I agree with what Kelly said. And Courtney's amazing. His whole family's incredible. There are other people that are talking on camera in the show about their experiences that you wouldn't normally see on camera, but have been out and around in the community a little bit. But I think it really takes a case-by-case basis. In answer to your question, Courtney, in the way that you framed it anyway, which is kind of coming out, if you were to come out on podcasts or you were to, you were kind of go out publicly on things. I mean, more the kind of boots on the ground counseling and support that I do, in a support group that I had earlier today with 20 people in it, is more about how do you talk to your loved ones? How do you talk to your parents? How do you talk to maybe your children or other people right around you? That's the part that I consider both, most important and kind of most sacred in a lot of ways. And that's the kind of work that happens on a weekly basis for me. The situation of how does somebody talk about this on a podcast or like for a TV show or whatever. That happens less frequently, but it still does happen, and there are people asking for advice about that. Certainly every month, sometimes every week. And again, it is a case by case basis, because it's like, I saw Paul in the chat earlier, and Paul was on Whitley Strieber's Dreamland podcast about a month ago, and he's talked about his experiences before a bit on X, and maybe in other places as well. But that was a significant, shift to go on to something like Dreamland, where there's a large audience. And then there are people like that, talk about this stuff for the first time on a cable TV show. Like there's that new show that Mitch Horowitz and Chrissy Newton are doing on Discovery, where, Alien Encounters, Fact or Fiction. Is that what it's called? I can't remember the exact title. And they're kind of doing this weird Judge Judy thing where they're like in a bar and they're deciding whether people had experiences or not. So it's kind of an interesting premise. But, like that situation is obviously going to be very different for the experiencers that are coming forward in a context like that, rather than the situation with Whitley, where he is naturally very sympathetic, and the audience itself is very sympathetic to what somebody like Paul would be saying in a situation like that. So it really.
I'm glad you brought it up. I'm really glad you brought it up. And I kind of figured you would, lead up to it, because I saw that, I saw people kind of going into a crossfire style interrogation, and, I wouldn't think you would recommend that to anybody, honestly, to have that kind of scrutiny, but I'm glad you hit it. So good one.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, no judgment against any particular broadcast, but I think people have to really use their own discernment in the context with which they decide to do these things. I might still not have come out and come forward if I hadn't had a great support network, and the way that it happened through the work of Ralph Blumenthal. I don't know when it would have happened if it didn't happen in that context. Yeah.
Well, welcome, Paul. Thanks. You could definitely come up in here and tell about your experiences. We would love to hear them if you want to share them again. So yeah, we can get contact with you at Calling All Beings, or you can contact us if you'd like to come on at callingallbeings1@gmail.com. Programming note for everybody that's out there: if you're watching us on X right now, if you would click on the link and go on YouTube and just give us a subscribe and a like, it would really be helpful to us a lot, and we would greatly appreciate that. Now on to my question. We're coming up on the hour, so we don't want to keep you guys too much longer, and I actually have 3 questions, so I'm going to get this one in, and then we'll see. I don't know if we're going to get another go around, but I'm curious, on behalf of the Bigfoot community, which we have been blessed to become a part of, which kind of started right after I met you in New York, Jay, the first time when we had the dinner with James. And then I said, guys, we got to, start having on folks. And I think Kelly may have even been on one of those episodes, but their community is not experiencing, and I'm kind of going to lean on you guys right now to give them some advice, because their community is not experiencing the sort of rush of disclosure, and they don't have representation from a Luis Elizondo, a Christopher Mellon, a Leslie Kane, a Ralph Blumenthal, or in the case of the senators like Marco Rubio and Kirsten and so forth, and the folks in the House. Do you have any advice for them on how to be able to get their topic recognized and get some form of disclosure, to the extent we've already had we are many, many miles down the road from when they're at. So what advice would you give them, Kelly and Jay?
I love this question so much. And like, I'm 100% here for Sasquatch disclosure. I think that
Heck yeah.
I think UFOs are kind of they're an interesting case, right? Because we kind of got this in with UFOs with the mainstream world because we had those like Navy videos because of sort of like the technology of it, and that we lucked out, right? I think without those Navy videos and the provenance of those things and like things being caught by multiple radar sensors and it being trained observers and all of that, like if we didn't have that, like we wouldn't be where we are right now. But
Well,
I think
can I say they have that? They have park rangers, they have military folks, they have law enforcement, but they don't. I would have run out of time naming Dr. Gary Nolan, even though they have Dr. Jeff Meldrum. We have I didn't get to name Dave and Alex and Ryan. I mean, we have so many that we couldn't even get through all the names. And Tim Gallaudet, just
totally. I mean, I think part of it, I think something that would help across kind of like the anomalous studies landscape is I think we all need to team up. And because
Yes.
number one, I think that like what we're dealing with has a ton of overlap and may ultimately be kind of the same thing. And that, I think that I know the Bigfoot community for a lot of reasons, there's a lot of stigma attached to Bigfoot, which is really unfortunate. And I could go on for hours and hours about what I think that's all about. But, at the end of the day, I think the more that we can all team up and compare notes and sort of, have a rising tide, raise all boats. I think that's going to not just help us make breakthroughs, because I think the more we find the similarities between these phenomena, like the closer we get to understanding what their ultimate origin is. And so, I think we just need to team up. Come hang out, Bigfoot people.
Jay, I'm telling you, Bigfoot, A Flash of Beauty is an amazing series on YouTube. And I guess I don't know what other it's on, but also A Flash of Beauty, the paranormal, I don't remember what they call it, the Paranormal Connection. It is amazing. But go ahead, Jay. What's your advice? What's your thoughts?
On how the Bigfoot people can get their disclosure? Is that the
Yes,
question?
sir. Yes, sir.
That's a great question. I think that it probably involves, well, it's tough, right? Because we hear stories of cover up there as well. There's a lot. And one thing that, in terms of people getting together, like what Kelly was talking about, there are a lot of corollaries in terms of debriefs when people have cryptid encounters, and especially in a military situation, and then they get taken back for a debrief. It's amazing how much their reporting on how that happens mirrors what happens in NHI UFO encounters, where there's usually some top brass from the local Air Force base or whatever. And then there's some curious kind of plainclothes people like off in the back corner, not saying anything, but making a bunch of notes, right? It's very much like, I mean, I've heard stories like that on like Sasquatch Chronicles that sound straight up just like Mario Woods' debrief. No different whatsoever in a lot of ways. So, I think that a lot of the same structures are holding this conversation back in both situations. And I think the argument might be similar from the powers that be in terms of like, oh, it would be too scary for people to understand that the woods are scary. Everybody knows the woods are scary. Like, why is that a thing? Like, why is that so hard to accept? They've got bears. There's like mountain lions in there and stuff. Snakes. Come on. You don't like people can and do die like on the regular off in those woods, off in those hills, in the national parks. So like, why is it that Bigfoot, which again has been talked about in many world cultures for centuries, that kind of being, whether it's Yeti, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, what have you. But how would they get the disclosure? I think that independent efforts that involve, biological anthropologists, if there are more Mike Masters on their side of things, and I know that there are, there's people like Jeff Meldrum and others, But the more that they can kind of bring people like that into their community, we've been really lucky in ufology to have people like Kevin Knuth and Gary Nolan and so many other people, Beatrice, so many other people, Ia Whiteley, so many people kind of joining the fold in a public facing way. And then there are other people in a private facing way. So maybe one way for this to happen is for, I'm sure that there are people in the cryptid community that know researchers that are okay with doing things behind the scenes, but maybe aren't willing to do things publicly yet. But maybe kind of just trying to gently move people in that direction, whether it's just doing more of the research, or whether it's about scientists coming forward about just being interested in the topic, like kind of the strategy that Gary Nolan is trying to do with Soul. Does that make sense? I think that might be more fruitful than trying to go through the federal government or something like that.
It totally is, and what's interesting, Jay, is there's so much, because the woods are basically governed by the Department of the Interior. I mean, I've got 30 years in government. I don't even know what SAPs exist. I haven't even heard of a SAP inside the Department of Interior. So they're really not having to answer any questions. No one's putting any direct pressure on them to have to counter any sort of narrative. So I'm sure they have a SAP, and that information that they're getting from these maybe even state park rangers up to the federal level forest rangers, and then to them is being compartmentalized quite well, because nobody's asking and they're not telling. But regarding education, I heard on a true crime podcast the other day, it was a young 20-something that was going to hike the Appalachian Trail for something like 10 miles, like 20 miles. I can't remember the exact distance. And then her friend was going to meet her up on the trail, and they were going to hike a certain distance together. Well, she never made it to that rendezvous point, and she survived. So let me just, break the ice right there. But what she had heard was something trailing her. You know how the footsteps, you stop, it stops. You keep going, it keeps going. And she's looking, she doesn't see it. She leaves the trail and heads downhill, thinking that there's a road downhill. And she headed for hours and hours and hours until she was absolutely exhausted, and then pitched a tent for the night. Never got to the main road that she was picturing in her mind. And then she heard around her campsite those footsteps. And the person doing the true crime podcast, she's thinking it's a person. And it's like, if there's a male predator in the woods that's after you, that's that close, and you pitch a tent and you just hear it if you've listened to anything about Sasquatch Chronicles, you mentioned Wes Germer's award-winning show, that that's consistent with what Bigfoot do. It probably was protecting her. It probably was keeping predators away from her by just circling and not even coming into camp or pressing on the tent. But people don't know. It never entered her mind, nor did it even enter the mind of the person podcasting about her experience. So the information isn't out there. And I think that information could be powerful for that hiker. Might have said, okay, this could be a Bigfoot. It's obviously not doing anything to me. I'm okay. A hunter ended up finding her dehydrated, sitting against a tree, exhausted, a day later. So that's how the story ended, and got her medical attention.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
That's wild.
So sorry to digress. It just kind of came up along with how knowledge that it's out there could have aided that hiker, that nothing's wrong, you're not in trouble. In fact, you might even be safer from a human predator with that creature, taking care of you. I'm sure you guys have heard about kids being carried back to camp from Bigfoot, and they said this furry bear fed me berries and slept, kept me warm for 3 days. I mean, would they think that was like a grizzly? I mean, you would be dinner for a hungry bear, especially in the springtime. Anyway, Nathan, take it away before I digress any further. Maybe we'll do like another, 10 minutes or so. We'll call it.
Right. Sounds good. We've veered a little bit into a subject that I think is important to discuss now, and that's sort of the topic of credibility, and how we as a society, really judge the truthfulness or credibility of any sort of form of evidence. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I sort of stopped looking at videos now. I don't really, of course we had the funny one this week, the still image of the UFO with the army men or whatever. So here I'm thinking also of things like the Nazca mummies, Bigfoot, which we just talked about. There's a whole host of things that go into this bucket. And I don't necessarily know how we address this, because we generally have a credibility crisis, I think, just broadly speaking right now, not necessarily just isolated to UFOs or Bigfoot or whatever, just like in our society. And that problem's not going to get like less of a problem. We're already, and Kelly, I know you're very familiar with this, we're moving pretty headlong into this artificially generated reality that we're all going to be occupying pretty soon. And so how do you see the truthfulness of UFO disclosure, phenomenon disclosure, making its way in that kind of context as we go forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. And I think part of it, I think part of what we're going to have to do is, like, we have to model for people as much as possible, just like what it looks like to truly not know and to be okay with that. Because I think that people are so quick to assign a truth value to kind of everything these days, like kind of immediately, and it falls kind of along party lines and along kind of like tribal lines and, whatever your allegiances are. And there usually isn't like a lot of kind of discernment or questioning about whatever that narrative is that you're just sort of becoming, another node of amplification for. And, though, and that how we're kind of functioning in our culture right now runs so counter to what is required for this field. I think something that is just true is that you're never going to be able to, I think is where your question's coming from. Like, we're never going to be able to affirm like whether or not someone else's like anomalous experience, their subjective experience, like whether or not it actually happened. There's no way to do that. And like, there are cases where there's physical evidence and you can see that like something happened, but like at the end of the day, I don't think that that's the way to approach experience or stories, is by trying to like decide the ultimate truth of them. I think that the better way to approach it is to listen to everyone and to try to look for patterns and things that emerge again and again. And then I think that when we look at the whole data set, instead of just trying to make like a judgment call on every little thing, that you start to see that come forward. And that was in the docuseries really important to us, because we didn't want to make something where like this experiencer has told their story, and so now we have to tell you about why this person isn't a thief and a liar. You know what I mean? Like we don't have to, strongman them and be like, they've never told a lie in their life, because everybody's told a lie in their life, right? I don't think anybody's going to hold up to that kind of scrutiny. And so instead of like, we wanted to flip the paradigm. So like, instead of presenting these stories and then making these, and then kind of like interrogating the witness and making them justify themselves, instead, listening to the story and then saying like, okay, like this is a story that's representative of what we're kind of seeing across the literature in general. And like, what are some frameworks that we can use to understand that or to think about it? And instead of asking the experiencer like to justify themselves, to say to the audience, like, well, hey, like what's going on with your worldview that this like very common thing in human experience doesn't fit? Like, have you considered these other ideas? And so I think that's really where we've tried to go with it.
Nice.
I think that's great response. Absolutely.
We got to kind of wrap things up, but maybe we can get Courtney must have left us. I don't know if
Yeah, she had to go.
Yeah, I get very concerned about the Alaskan Bigfoot. I know, Jay, you listen to Sasquatch. They're always very violent encounters up there, and that's where Courtney's broadcasting from tonight. So I told her, I know Courtney likes to go out in the wilderness. I said, Courtney, do not go Bigfooting in Alaska. Just do me that favor. Wait till you're in Montana. Wait till you're home at your family farm in Pennsylvania. Do not go Bigfooting in Alaska. I have heard there's never an encounter that isn't terrifying that I've heard in Alaska. It's just so. Anyway, Debs, let's get if you got a quick hitter for our friends, we want to get them out of here. We've already kept them over an hour, so go ahead, ma'am.
I'll try to do it quick. So, since you are communicating with experiencers and having those conversations, do you think there's any shift in what is being conveyed? Because we know messages have been conveyed often in the past since the rest of the world has started to step up with the disclosure process.
Yeah, I mean, there are. I think it's tricky because there are different types of there are different modalities, and in those different modalities there seem to be different non-human intelligences or even discarnate entities that or that's how they portray themselves in these situations often. And so it kind of depends. There are situations like earlier today or earlier this week where I was talking to people that are more aligned with like mediumship, right? And some of those people in mediumship are receiving different kinds of messages and more personal messages sometimes than others. My guess is that when you're talking about this, that you're pointing towards like prophecy or something like that. Is that right, Deb?
Well, okay, so I'll tell you this comes from a personal place, like some impressions I've gotten about what's going on that are not from our side of things. So I feel like there's been a little bit of a shift in what messaging might be given to people who are better able to receive those messages and convey them to others. So I was just wondering if you notice a pattern, and I'll give you an example. So Earl Grey, who has worked with experiencers before, once told me that there are less incidents where people are having um, sexual encounters, so to speak, and there's been a shift away from that, and the encounters have been more about messaging and just communication. So I was just wondering if you guys noticed any differences, any patterns. I just feel like the world is kind of waking up. And I feel like if the world is starting to wake up, there might be a change in what we're being told.
I think, yeah, okay. That's really appropriate. Thanks, Deb. Yeah, I do see patterns like what you're saying, that it seems like the main kind of biological or medical um, examination program or programs that people report that are usually associated with the grays, small grays, tall grays, and sometimes mantid beings. Every once in a while, you'll find a random humanoid or what people think of as hybrids in there as well, of course. But that those reports have gone down in numbers, absolutely, since about the late 90s. There were a lot of cases that were kind of going up until about 2003, 2004, even 2007, 2008. But it seemed like there was a whole wave of that, whatever that was. And there are still elements of that, in that, as we kind of know now, there are folks that get regular checkups, right? You can think of it it's not, it's maybe a little bit crass in some ways, but it's like how we tag. It's a little bit like how people studying animals or sea life might tag a creature and then go and find it again, right? There seems to be something like that happened within that program, where somebody's kind of like biological development was tracked for a little while. That's the best guess that we have, and that it had something also to do with procreation, and that it had something to do with procreation, and so that does seem to have dwindled. I think that people still do report it, but the numbers have dropped. That's true. As far as the messaging goes, the messaging is so personal that in some ways, and I feel like a lot of the messaging, kind of like what you're saying, is for people that are meant to hear it, or it's very directed. And so in some ways along those lines, I think that one could make a case that it's important for people to kind of acclimate to the conversation and to the topic overall before they start really getting their ear to the ground about what the messaging is from last week or last month or something like that. Because some of that stuff still needs to get processed. And one of the weird games that non-human intelligence often seems to play with people is about precognition. And one speculation along those lines is that different forms of NHI maybe have a longer sense of the present than we do, and can kind of, experience the just forward and the just past in a way that we kind of can't. And we don't necessarily know why that is. We often speculate about, it's just because they're time travelers, or it's because there's a block universe and all of this is already going to happen no matter what. And they're just able to kind of have like a 5D view of this block universe. But the reality is that we don't exactly know. However, some of those messages do tend to have clues in them about things that are just about to happen. And I think that's a deeply personal experience. And it's usually, that's the kind of information that it seems better served for experiencers to share with each other rather than for it to be crowdsourced, because then we hear more noise to signal, if that makes sense.
Jay, it's interesting you were talking about the tagging, and actually the police have given me an anklet that was like that so they could find me again. So I don't know why they thought that I wouldn't come back, but anyway, I guess it's not important. Final question for you guys, and we'll get you out of here. This will be an XY question going to Kelly first and then Jay. I think it's important for the general public to know about the phenomenon because of, or I think this is why X is why I think it's important, and then Y is why I that reason. So basically, this is what I think they should know, and Y is why they should know.
Yeah, I mean, I think people should know that that these things happen, that really strange things happen, and that they are a part of human experience. And I think that we should know that because we're humans, and that we should have a fuller access to the fullness of our and richness of our own reality. I think that there's so many, for people who are in a position to be able to acknowledge and integrate the anomalous things that happen to them. These things can be profound in terms of shifting someone's consciousness, in terms of helping them connect to a deeper purpose in their lives, and also just in terms of radically shifting their understanding of reality, and and the ability to kind of intuit some things that maybe aren't so obvious when you're like completely submerged in our culture, but when you have something that shakes you up a little bit, suddenly these things become like self-apparent, right? Like the universe becomes it becomes both more mysterious and less mysterious, because like at least there's not that thing in the back of your mind, you're like, this doesn't feel right. Yeah, and I think that's why I think that we're amputating a huge and vitally important part of human experience that is a part of what it means to be a human. And I don't even think that we have a full idea of what humanity is capable of, in a context where we are able to kind of like integrate those anomalous experiences in our lives. And so I think that's really important. And that's
so you don't think they should be like the Budweiser draft horse with the little blinders on the
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Jay, what should people know, and for what reason? Quick hitter.
Well, I agree with Kelly. And that's kind of a central thesis of the work that we're doing right now. I think that people should know that reality is much stranger than we've been led to believe, and we should know that because we exist and we have lives, and we deserve to know more about this reality that we live in, and that there are so many challenging aspects of day-to-day life. There are so many reasons to be scared or worried about the future. There are so many reasons to be concerned about what we see right around us within society, within culture, for any number of different reasons, no matter what political persuasion or no matter where you live in the world these days. And along those lines, this is a conversation that involves re-enchantment. It involves mystery, like Julie in the chat was just saying. And being able to re-enchant your life and being able to get a sense of this kind of wider reality that is right around us could provide an avenue, not for escapism, but to really embrace the fullness of life. And in a way that, your day job or kind of consensus reality can't really provide.
So you're saying
Yeah.
there's something more important than Republican Democratic politics in the world? Is there
God forbid,
is there
right?
really a greater framework that we could? Wow,
Yeah,
Nathan,
exactly. Right.
I'm blown away. All right. Any final thoughts, or we go with Cabby goodbyes? Your call, Nathan.
I just want to, I'm going to, if I start
Please.
talking, it'll be a Cabby goodbye, but I just, I really want to say thank you to both of you because you're inspirational to me with the efforts that you are making here. I know it's not easy, I think some people think like, well, this is just something that you jump out of bed and you have all the energy in the world and you do it every day and it's effortless, but it's not always effortless. Sometimes it is. And when it is, it's magical, but it's not always like that. It takes real effort and I appreciate it. It's not something all of us can do, but I feel like, you're doing the things that we need. And so thank you for that. And we're big supporters. We're ready to, kind of cheer you on as it rolls out. And I know that's just like, this is just like first phase. Like it's a Marvel Cinematic Universe that you've got planned. So I'm excited to see, everything that's coming up for you guys.
Oh, thank you so much, Nathan. That means a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Nathan. It's great to see you, by the way.
I finally fixed the camera.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I just want to also shout out Julie, our chat moderator. You can tell that she was, has her degree in library science because you can see all the brilliant thoughts that she put up on the screen tonight with all of her perspectives that she has. She really just has such a great grasp on every. I mean, hell, she's experienced everything from Bigfoot to UFOs and paranormal. I mean, so she's got the hat trick, to use that hockey phrase. Deb, please with your Cabby goodbye for our wonderful guests.
Thank you for coming and giving us your perspective. I think it's inspiring what you're trying to do, which is basically raising the level of this conversation and giving people room to have the conversation. So thank you very much for coming and sharing. And I cannot wait to hear more about future documentary work, books, and conferences. So thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you.
They're going to contact me about the checkbook thing, and then I'm going to refer them over to Nathan. So,
all right.
Shout out to James Iandoli. By the way, our mutual friend of everybody in this program. He is coming up on Cab. I don't remember the date, but he is booked on the show. So we're going to get to see Brother James Iandoli. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Amen.
And free Karen Reed. Free Karen Reed, our homegirl in Massachusetts. So if you haven't checked that out, check out that hashtag on X, free Karen Reed, and you'll see what the story be. Gonna take too long to talk about it here. So what I want to focus on is saying thank you to, as I stated earlier in the program, 2 brilliant orators, 2 brilliant content creators. Both done been in front of the camera, both done been behind the camera now, and gonna make y'all a series that you can watch. And I'll tell you what, you're trying to get a hold of me, it's 806. I'm just kidding, man. You know, UFO documentary. Bill, what the hell is this man doing up in there? Get him off screen. Are you crazy? Anyway, thank you so much for coming on here. It's great to have you. We've had Kelly a number of times come and co-host. Jay, also it'd be great to have you come and co-host for a Bigfoot or UFO guest, but I know you're damn busy. So thank you so much. We're honored that you come and spend some time with us. All right.
Thank you
Thanks for
guys so
having us.
much. It's always
Thanks
so
to
much fun
everybody
to
in
see
the
you
chat
guys.
as well. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And Jules, Paul, what's up, man? You got an amen for you, Finn. Love Indoli. Everybody loves Indoli, right?
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
So for Jay Christopher King, for Kelly, for Nathan, and for my homegirl Debs, this is DJ saying peace out. One love. We'll see you down the road. And we're always wondering what's up around the bend.